operate, often with, let's say, reduced transparency and oversight. And we want to explore the profound impact this has on individual rights and legal processes. We'll also try to unpack some of the historical and, well, contemporary methods these entities employ to manipulate public perception and ultimately influence societal control.
Right. And our central question, I think, boils down to this. To what extent do these documented methods of secrecy and manipulation, do they really constitute an inescapable architecture of societal control? And maybe more importantly, how resilient are individual rights and our legal processes against these quite formidable forces?
Exactly. So my position is going to be that, look, despite the very real and concerning nature of these methods, and they are concerning, the persistent attempts we see at oversight, the courageous emergence of whistleblowers, and ongoing legal challenges, they all demonstrate a resilient system.
It is an increasingly inescapable architecture of, well, comprehensive societal control.
All right, let's get into our positions then. So, from my perspective, while acknowledging the gravity of documented practices, things like the CIA's infamous MK-Ultra program, with its unethical mind control experiments, or even aggressive contemporary immigration policies, it's really crucial to recognize the inherent friction within these systems, a friction that actively prevents, I think, total unchecked control. We've seen instances repeatedly where truth does emerge, despite some pretty strenuous efforts to conceal it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but take, for example, former Justice Department lawyer Ezra Ravini. He became known because he was fired for, and this is the quote, telling a federal judge the truth about erroneous deportations. Now, his case, difficult as it was for him, highlights an internal struggle for honesty right within the system itself. Similarly, when you see Florida state lawmakers or even members of Congress attempting to inspect facilities like Alligator Alcatraz, that's an immigration detention facility known for pretty severe conditions, and they get denied entry under these vague safety reasons, well, that denial itself, paradoxically, brings public attention to the lack of transparency.
Okay, but does attention equal change?
Well, it's a start. The repeated exposure and the public demand for accountability, which is implied by this very idea of a vicious cycle of secrecy that's been described. It suggests that unchecked power continually meets resistance. And furthermore, legal challenges, difficult as they are, serve as a vital check. We've seen federal district courts issue nationwide injunctions against executive orders trying to deny birthright citizenship. That directly confronts the 14th Amendment Supreme Court precedent. These efforts, they're arduous, absolutely, but they underscore the enduring capacity of democratic and legal institutions to push back against overreach. It demonstrates that manipulation isn't always absolute or even always unperceived.
I see. Well, I come at this from a different angle, really. One where the evidence, as I read it, points to a far more pervasive and honestly increasingly effective architecture of control, where secrecy and manipulation aren't just anomalies, they're systemic operational norms. Historically, look at the deliberate destruction of the MK-Ultra files. People like Sidney Gottlieb, Richard Helms, high-level CIA officials. They did it explicitly, quote, to prevent others from knowing what they had been doing. That establishes a really chilling precedent for deliberate obfuscation, doesn't it?
It does, historically, yes.
And this lack of transparency, it has clear contemporary parallels, like the denial of access to facilities like Alligator Alcatraz you mentioned. Officials there refuse to provide details about detainees, about operations. They explicitly prevent independent scrutiny. And the impact on individual rights? It can be devastating. Look at the case of Kilmer Abrigo Garcia, erroneously deported directly to a secret prison in El Salvador, suffered psychological and physical torture, and the government justified it without due process. Beyond this, our legal processes themselves are actively undermined through what can really only be called the weaponization of law. We see these denaturalization campaigns targeting naturalized citizens based on often minor paperwork errors, clearly for political purposes. And the Justice Department has, at times, directly defied judges' orders, leading to what's been termed a degradation of the principles of honesty to the courts.
And then there are the more advanced tactics, reality engineering, things like hyperstition, this idea where a fiction, through belief and action, actually makes itself real, or something like Project 2025, which is a detailed policy blueprint aimed at radically restructuring the federal government for a specific ideological alignment, even rewriting historical narratives. Couple that with pervasive surveillance systems, things like Gorgon Stare, reportedly a massive data aggregation platform for intelligence, and Palantir-like AI systems used for, and this is a quote, automated real-time population-level predictive control by sifting through just vast amounts of personal data. These fundamentally reshape public perception. It creates a kind of fractured hall of mirrors where discerning truth becomes incredibly difficult. And the paradox of power suggests, that all power eventually corrupts.
This all leads, I argue, to an inescapable and, frankly, irreversible societal shift towards comprehensive control.
Okay, thank you for laying out those initial positions so clearly. It's evident we have fundamentally different interpretations of the resilience of our systems here. Let's delve deeper into our first point of contention then, the actual effectiveness of transparency and oversight. I'm arguing that even when faced with deliberate obfuscation, these attempts at oversight still matter because they force information out into the public sphere. So, while the denial of access to places like Alligator Alcatraz is, yes, deeply concerning, the very fact that Florida lawmakers and members of Congress attempt these inspections and that their denials become public knowledge, that signals that total secrecy is continually challenged. The information about these incidents, which, we've both drawn from, indicates that even if suppressed initially, information eventually surfaces.
The firing of Ezra Raveney, the Justice Department lawyer, yes, it was a punitive act meant to silence. But it's also an admission, isn't it? That a truth was spoken and that internal processes were in some way violated. This suggests that even within these secretive structures, there are internal struggles for honesty and there are external pressures for accountability. That prevents a truly opaque system from ever becoming absolute. The leaks, the whistleblowers themselves, they are a form of oversight, however dangerous it might be for the individuals involved.
I'm sorry, but I don't really buy that the mere surfacing of information, often years later, often fragmented, constitutes effective oversight against a systemic effort at suppression. The deliberate destruction of the MKUltra files, orchestrated by people like Gottlieb and Helms, ensured that a definitive accounting for those unethical experiments became, by design, impossible. That wasn't an accident. And the vague safety reasons cited for denying access to Alligator Alcatraz, come on, they're not about actual safety. They are about controlling the narrative, about preventing external validation of potentially horrific conditions that lawmakers and the public, frankly, have a right to understand.
Right, but the attempt itself...
The attempt is noted. But look at the operational reality. The use of masked ICE agents in unmarked vans actively refusing to identify themselves or show ID. That specifically prevents local police, the public, anyone, from understanding or challenging federal actions in real time. And yes, the firing of a whistleblower like Raveney brings a moment of truth, maybe, but it also sends a profoundly chilling message to anyone else considering speaking out. It effectively stifles future truth-telling. It reinforces an environment where transparency isn't merely delayed, it's actively thwarted, made dangerous. These aren't temporary setbacks for secrecy. I think they are integral parts of its operational success.
That's an interesting framing. Suggesting these acts of exposure are more a symptom of deep entrenchment than a sign of resilience. Okay. Let's shift focus then to a related and perhaps even more personal aspect, the erosion of individual rights and due process. You paint a stark picture, but I still believe there's a robust defense in place, even if it's under strain. Even in the face of, yes, aggressive government actions, individual rights and due process aren't completely eradicated. Consider the successful nationwide injunctions issued by federal district courts against those executive orders trying to deny birthright citizenship. These judicial actions clearly demonstrate that the judiciary can and does act as a vital check on executive overreach, It upholds constitutional principles against attempts to subvert them. And while denaturalization campaigns are deeply worrying, the fact that they often operate under these, quote, vague standards and explicitly invite legal challenge, well, that indicates the process isn't universally accepted as legitimate. It remains subject to legal scrutiny, which offers at least a measure of protection against purely arbitrary targeting. Furthermore, the advice given to citizens to carry passport cards. Okay, it's a defensive measure, yes, but it's also a recognition that proof of citizenship still holds legal weight. It offers a concrete, albeit challenged, form of protection against erroneous claims. It shows there's still a fight to be had within the legal framework.
That's a compelling argument about the judiciary acting as a check. I grant you that in theory. But have you considered the actual impact on individuals and how easily those checks can sometimes be sidestepped or just overwhelmed? The case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, for instance. He was erroneously deported to a secret jail, tortured, despite a specific court order against it, and the government's subsequent justification lacked any real due process. That profoundly illustrates the erosion of fundamental rights in practice, regardless of what the law says on paper.
A horrific case, absolutely.
And these denaturalization campaigns, using minor paperwork errors as a pretext to strip citizenship, potentially on a massive scale, that creates a climate of widespread fear and vulnerability. It effectively turns citizenship into a kind of conditional privilege, especially for naturalized citizens. This isn't just a legal challenge, it's almost a redefinition of what citizenship means in practice. And the willingness of the executive branch to issue orders that, frankly, flout the plain language of the 14th Amendment and Supreme Court precedent, threatening to render American-born children stateless, that's not merely a legal challenge. That is an active, aggressive subversion of the very foundation of individual rights and legal protections. Forcing citizens into a situation where they feel they need papers, please, is not, I repeat, not a sign of resilience. It's a symptom of an authoritarian shift where basic civil liberties are under constant threat, and the burden of proof is unjustly placed on the individual.
The individual stories you present are indeed harrowing, and they highlight immense suffering. There's no denying the personal toll, but I think we also need to look beyond the immediate effects to the broader picture of societal control. And here, I believe there are inherent limitations to how much perception can truly be manipulated long-term. While powerful narratives can shape reality, I would argue that widespread public awareness acts as a crucial counterforce. So while powerful narratives can certainly shape reality, the very discussion and understanding of concepts like hyperstition, that idea of a fiction making itself real, or the broader architecture of control, reality engineering, the fact we're even talking about them in public discourse, signifies a growing awareness that these methods exist. And this awareness itself, I think, is a form of defense. It empowers individuals to critically assess information, to resist manipulation, at least to some degree. Think about historical programs like MK Ultra again. Their operational failures to achieve true mind control, like creating programmed killers, suggest inherent limitations, maybe human limitations, to direct psychological manipulation. The fact that cruelty as policy is openly criticized, rather than just universally accepted, means it's not universally effective in shaping unquestioning obedience. Public scrutiny, even if it's delayed, acts as a counterforce to such tactics. It prevents their absolute success in shaping a single, controlled narrative.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning, because the effectiveness of modern manipulation goes far, far beyond simple persuasion or even those historical, somewhat crude attempts at mind control. Take the Paul Benowitz case. Intelligence agencies systematically fed him disinformation, even beamed fake alien transmissions, all to discredit a genuine observer of alleged secret military activity. That demonstrates a truly chilling capacity for constructing false realities and for pathologizing genuine inquiry. This isn't just about influencing belief, it's about making people question their own sanity, their own observations.
A deeply disturbing case, yes.
And cruelty as policy epitomized by something like Alligator Alcatraz designed if recorded to scare the pants off immigrants. That's not about operational efficiency. It is deliberate psychological coercion intended to influence population behavior at a societal level. Furthermore, initiatives like Project 2025 explicitly aim to, quote, rewrite the source code of the federal government for ideological alignment. That includes a comprehensive effort to reshape cultural narratives, even historical understanding. Couple that with pervasive surveillance systems like Gorgon Stare, this massive data aggregation platform, and Palantir-like AI for automated real-time population-level predictive control. These methods transcend mere suggestion. They move towards a sophisticated technological architecture that actively shapes thoughts and behaviors. It makes societal control increasingly difficult to even evade or sometimes even perceive. This can lead to irreversible shifts in how truth itself is formed and believed. The awareness you speak of, while certainly present in some circles, I fear it struggles to compete against this multifaceted, technologically advanced assault on objective reality.
Okay. As we conclude our discussion today, it is abundantly clear that the landscape of transparency, individual rights, and societal control is, it's fraught with complex challenges and definitely competing forces. I still maintain that while the power of state, and maybe non-state actors too, to operate with reduced transparency and employ manipulative tactics is undeniable and often deeply disturbing, the mechanisms of exposure, the attempts at oversight, the legal pushback, however imperfect they are, they still offer a vital, if maybe embattled defense. The continuous surfacing of information, the persistence of whistleblowers who risk literally everything, and the judiciary's often difficult but critical role in upholding foundational rights, these demonstrate that the aspiration for an open and accountable society, though severely tested, is not yet extinguished. These systems are under immense pressure, yes, but I don't think they are entirely broken, nor is control truly absolute.
And I must reiterate that the documented, historical, and contemporary methods, the secrecy, the weaponized law, the advanced reality engineering, they paint a stark picture. A picture of an increasingly entrenched and sophisticated architecture of control. The erosion of individual rights we've discussed, the active subversion of legal processes, and the sophisticated technologically augmented manipulation of public perception. They point towards a future where discerning truth becomes a monumental task. And societal shifts, once enacted by these powerful forces, become exceedingly difficult to reverse. The very foundations of a free and informed society, I believe, are being undermined piece by piece, and the tools for resistance are genuinely struggling to keep pace.
So we leave you, our listeners, to consider the arguments presented today and draw your own conclusions about this really delicate balance between power and accountability, and the ever-present need for vigilance in understanding the forces that shape our world. There is always more to explore in these critical topics, and we certainly encourage you to continue this essential inquiry.